In this episode, we're going to be talking about an industry that imports up to the tune of $35 billion a year on the continent of Africa. And that industry is normally shoved aside. Nobody really pays particular attention about that industry. A case in point, there was a big conference that just ended recently called the Africa CEO Forum, which was the largest gathering of CEOs and corporate leaders and heads of states, government institutions, big banks, big money, bilateral institutions. Talk about World Bank, IM, all those guys were at that meeting for 2 days. Intensive meeting, which was powerful. And guess what? That industry was barely mentioned. $35 billion a year. That industry imports. Importation predominantly outside of the continent of Africa. That's what we're about to discuss. We're going to talk about that industry. And most importantly, I would say earth-shattering opportunities that are available in that industry right now. That industry needs some amazing disruptors. And we're going to be talking about two investment opportunities to unearth that industry, to actually disrupt that industry. So I would want you to stay with me. And the clue about that industry, I'm just going to give you a clue about that industry in a jiffy. Right. Before we continue with this content, I would like to introduce you to a checklist that we put together. It's called the African Market Entry Checklist. So if you have a business or you're an investor and you want to enter into any African market, any of the 54 countries in Africa, you need to do it right. So we put together masterfully a 14-page checklist that if you follow step by step, there is no way you wouldn't have a seamless market entry experience in Africa. So if you wonder, it's free. You can download that report. There's a link within the description section of this video, or there's also going to be a QR code somewhere on this screen that you can just scan and get access to that report. It's not only that. We're also giving you free access to one of our amazing tools as Africa Insights AI. We have a tool called Investment Opportunities Finder. So if you request for that report, we also give you free access to that report. That report can tell you every hottest investment opportunity in any market in Africa, coupled with detailed market insights about challenges, risks, about market summary, about future trends, about regulatory framework. It's amazing. It's you are interested in stuff like that, you can scan the QR code or use the link in the description to get hold of that report. Right, let's jump into our content right now. I'm so excited about it. So this is an industry that's very, very dear to me because a couple of years back, that was the industry I worked in. The industry is healthcare, African healthcare industry. To me, it's a relatively neglected industry, and that worries me. The reason why it worries me is that healthcare typically is basically like a national or continental security kind of risky industry. COVID became a prime example when Africa was very unprepared in terms of medical supplies, equipment to deal with the incident of COVID. We were not very prepared. So what happened was that it became like a fire drill. Like we weren't prepared. So whatever happened was like a fire that has happened in the building. Everybody's calling emergency. Can somebody help me? That was what it was. So what happened was that the Western world made sure that they satisfied the needs of their citizens. Then the scraps that they had, they passed on to Africa. I think, thank God, the impact of COVID on Africa wasn't that great. If it was that bad compared to other places on the planet, Africa would have been badly exposed. So I'm just going to share my screen and then we jump into this amazing sets of opportunities right there. So these are what I'll call them two urgent and lucrative healthcare investment opportunities in Africa. So as I would put it, let's put it this way. I just wanted to get the bigger picture first. So today, Africa imports a whooping 70% of its medicines outside. Not only that, the worst one is when it comes to medical equipment, and I'll kind of merge medical equipment together with disposables or consumables, right? It's 90% importation rate. When you combine the two together, the amount of money we spend as a continent is roughly around 35 billion. And yet, when big decisions are being made, or business decisions are being made on the continent, that is along the peripheral, right? So at the conference, the biggest winners were energy, uh, um, minerals, capital flows. Those are big. Why? Because they are big players in those fields. So what that tells me is that in Africa, there are not many big healthcare players on the continent. That is the reason why healthcare gets shoved aside on a major platform like that. To me, that's the only reason. Yes, there are players, but there are not many of them that are big, large healthcare, health sector players on the continent. To me, that is an opportunity for somebody or some people to jump in and run with it. Because why? We need that health, safety, and security as a continent so that if anything happens, we don't have to depend on external sources to get our healthcare right. Else, we might be exposed very badly. Else, people may die needless deaths, completely needless deaths. So, with that said, let's jump into two of the key opportunities I am seeing from where I sit. As far as analysis is concerned, as far as AfricaInsights.ai is concerned, these are the two opportunities amongst a slew of others, right, that we are going to be talking about. The first one, which is very dear to me because I used to work in this industry before. I used to work as a strategic sourcing negotiator. Basically, I was doing healthcare sourcing and negotiation whilst I was working for a company in Dallas called Med Assets, which is now called Vizient. Had a great time there, great experience, great people. And basically, I was negotiating big multi-million dollar, sometimes $1 billion healthcare contracts. So things like orthopedic, the full category of orthopedics is huge. Neuro, the medical side too, massive, kind of category buckets within the healthcare space. So this is what I'm looking at. Yes, in healthcare, there are many opportunities. One of them is pharmaceutical manufacturing. As you saw, 70% of all our medicines are imported. And what happens when 70%? Actually, let me just don't lose your train of thought. Let me just show you something based off on AfricaInsights.ai. I'm just going to show you something real quick, and then we jump back on. So we have this tool amongst our dozen tools, right? So we have one called the Imports Finder that helps you to find imports of every country in Africa, or what each country imports outside of Africa. It's a phenomenal report, right? So I just ran this report. So I just queried Ghana just a few seconds ago. I'm just going to show you that. So when I queried Ghana, I don't want to run it again because I've already done, and I don't want to get the screen to be redundant, as I don't want to waste your time. But this is quite an eye opener, right? So this report here indicates that Ghana actually imports approximately about $20 billion, give or take, right? It's not 100%, but it's close. And okay, so, and these are the broad categorizations of imports. So it's like basically an aggregated kind of imports based on the category. So in this case, energy is Ghana's crude petroleum, which falls under energy products. Ghana's biggest import, approximately about 3.2 billion. Okay. And let's scroll. As we scroll down, we're going to see healthcare. So healthcare is in two buckets. This is pharmaceuticals, right? So Ghana's importation bill, Ghana spent approximately about $600 million of pharmaceuticals. That is medicine alone, right? That's not the only one in healthcare. There's also others within healthcare. That is medical instruments, which I think disposables, consumables are bundled under. That comes in about $410 million a year. Ghana is just a country of 34, 33, 34 million. So when you combine these two, what you are getting is Ghana imports about $1 billion for medical, pharmaceutical supplies. That is significant. And Ghana is just one of 54 countries in Africa. So now let's look at another report here, which is the search by commodity. And you can search by keywords. Basically, what this does is that when you enter the commodity name, it will put on a map the number of countries or the countries that import those commodities based on that keyword, right? So let's try a commodity like, let's say pharmaceuticals. Okay. All right. So with that, then I search for that. All right, great. So the first thing that I want you to see, Africa is made up of 54 countries. When we search pharmaceuticals, look at that. It found 53 countries importing products matching pharmaceuticals. That is significant, right? So look at this. Out of the 54 countries, 53 are showing up in the report. And so these bubbles basically show the level of imports, or in terms of the amount of times the report mentions pharmaceuticals within the import library, right? Within the imports library, as we call it. So Nigeria is saying that Nigeria, there are 8 matches of the word pharmaceuticals in all their imports, right? Very soon we're going to have where it's going to show the aggregate volume or aggregate amount that is spent per country. But it's almost synonymous with the size of the bubble. So Nigeria is a huge importer of pharmaceutical goods, right? But when you look at it, I have just zoomed in so that you can see it very clearly. Almost practically every country imports pharmaceuticals. Let me just zoom out because the bubbles are large, so it just clutters the entire map. So look at that. Everywhere is showing you every country imports, right? That is pharmaceuticals. Let me just use the word medical, right? Medical, right? And I will search for medical. Okay, so the search for medical is complete. It's found 52 out of 54 African countries. I just want to show you the extent that at which importation of medical products, healthcare products is very prevalent in Africa. It's a massively underserved market when it comes to healthcare. This just shows, the bubbles just shows you what it is. So now let's jump back to our presentation. So the first opportunity, as I said, now you've seen, it's very clear. The first opportunity, as you can see, is MedSurg. MedSurg is huge. My question is, why are we importing disposable? I said pharmaceuticals are there. I know a lot of work is being done in the pharmacy area in terms of vaccines and manufacturing of tablets and capsules, antibiotics and stuff. I know governments are taking steps, a little bit slow, but it's happening gradually, right? But I don't see that same momentum in the area of medical and surgical disposables. These are consumables that are used every day in the hospital. And for these products are through the roof. Because no matter who you are, no matter how poor you are, when you are sick, God forbid, and you have an asset, you may even sell the asset to regain your health back. Healthcare is an area that the people, individuals, organizations are going to spend regardless of the season, right? But we, as a continent, we import things that we have no business importing. And I'm just going to run through a few of them. So my question is, why do we import gloves, exam gloves or surgical gloves? Why do we import them? It's a completely unnecessary thing that we as a continent can change. And not only that, gauze. So, and I'm going to talk about wound care as a category. So gauze forms part of the entire wound care category. So why are we importing gauze, right? Why are we importing surgical drapes? I know when COVID came, a lot of local companies started producing masks. If we can produce masks, can we use the same process to start producing surgical drapes? Then another one is surgical scalpels and blades. This is a category that I'm very conversant with because in my previous work at Mediaset, that was one of the contracts I negotiated. Surgical scalpels and blades. They use all these blades for surgery, and then particularly the other ones that they use for cesarean section for pregnant women. There are companies in Africa right now that are into auto parts manufacturing. If we can manufacture auto parts, can't we manufacture surgical blades and scalpels so that we don't have to import these coming out of China or India or anywhere else? That is my question. So other areas that we can manufacture. And when I say we can, I'm talking about a potential investor that can come in to build a manufacturing plant to do this. Because when you do it in one African country now, because of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, AfCFTA, now you can potentially export to other African countries virtually duty free or tariffs. Many importation or tariffs or barriers are going to be removed because it's an Africa under the AfCFTA agreement. Africa is being treated as one big giant market, just like the European Union is. So once you have a factory in, say, Ghana or Nigeria or Kenya or Uganda, then you can begin to get into other African countries that do not have that type of manufacturing capability to supply them medical supplies. And it's hot cake because everybody needs them. So these are some of them. So catheters, syringes, surgical drapes, we've talked about them already. Disposable gowns and shoe covers. If we can do masks, we can do disposable gowns and shoe covers. Then ECG electrodes, some Europeans call it EKG electrodes, the electrodes that the cardiologists use to check to, to check your heart function, basically. Then chart paper. Chart paper was one agreement that I did in my Mediaset days. We have no business importing paper in Africa. This is just a graph sheet or a specialized medicalized graph sheet. We don't have any incentive to be importing chart paper at all. Then blood collection, the whole set, when you go to the lab and they're collecting the blood and all the syringes and everything, we should be able to manufacture these locally. Then for me, the big giant one is wound care. Wound care is a huge category. I remember when I was working at Mediaset, that was one of the first agreements that I did together with I think two of my work colleagues. It was that category alone was about $1.5 billion. We negotiated that contract. It's 18-month contract. It's huge. And it covers things like sutures, skin adhesives, wound drainage, and many more. And sutures are typically that string that when you get injured, they use to sew your skin back. That string is called suture, right? So there are different types of sutures. All these we can manufacture them in Africa. And so I want somebody, an investor who is very serious at this, to look into the medical disposable side. Yes, there are other opportunities. There are other opportunities in pharmaceutical manufacturing. There are other opportunities in terms of cloud computing with healthcare, AI. There are many others, but I'm zeroing in telemedicine and others. But I'm zeroing in on these two for a good reason, because they've been neglected. right? So that's the first one. So let's look at the next opportunity, and this one is huge. This is big, and this one is fun. If there's a word called fun, it's more fun. But before we do that, just want to remind you, if you want to enter the African market, you're an investor, you're a consultant, you're a multinational, you have to enter Africa right. So I have a free checklist for you about how to enter the African market right. If you follow these checklists, you're going to have a seamless experience in your African market entry. That report is free for you to download. You can download that report via the link in the description or via the QR code on this screen right here. And if you are looking for investment opportunities like the one that I'm talking about, I put together a tool within the tool set of AfricaInsights.ai called the Investment Opportunities Finder. That is the tool you can use to identify cutting edge opportunities for all 54 countries in Africa in 18 sectors. You can pull opportunities like breeze within seconds. You can pull opportunities across the entire continent. So if you're interested in that, scan the QR code or click the link and let us know you're interested, and we'll get you sorted. We'll get you sorted out, basically. Right. So let's jump into the next opportunity, which I'm very, very excited about. That is this opportunity. I describe it as Skills Fund and Nursing College PPPs. PPP is public-private partnerships, right? So let's jump in what it is, right? This is huge and serious. It's estimated that Africa could be short. This Africa Development Bank came up with this at that meeting at the Africa CEOs Forum. They said that this is alarming. A couple of things are alarming in Africa. This one, Africa could be short by 6 million trained nurses by the year 2030. That is just 5 years away. Let us sink in. 6 million nurses by 2030. One of the reasons why I'm very, very particular about this, I will now share it very quickly. It's mind-boggling, right? Now, public nursing schools that does the training of nurses, that processes nursing training, churns them out so that they can serve in our hospitals and clinics. The public ones can only absorb 35%. 65% of young, vibrant, qualified people who want to do nursing cannot do nursing because there are no spaces. This is huge. Let's take a pause on that. On top of that, the 35% capacity that we produce, a large chunk of them are getting, I would say, vacuumed into Europe, North America, Australia, and the rest. Then the number or the quantity of nurses that are leaving the shores of Africa for Europe and North America, astronomical. So we do not have enough. The little we have to are getting, I will use the word vacuum cleaned out of the continent. And that is a huge risk. So when you combine the risk of the medical supply side and you combine the risk of the personnel side, it becomes very scary. Now, although I'm going to talk predominantly about nursing, but there's also other things that are happening within this whole thing about staffing and human resource within the healthcare. Now, it's not only nurses that are leaving, doctors too, particularly fresh, young doctors that have just been trained. I was shocked to hear recently that one doctor told me that just this year alone, he signed off on 30 doctors in Ghana who needed some kind of is it testimonial, whatever it is that they needed to be able to start work in US and Europe. He signed off 30 of them. He alone, he just one doctor. What about other senior doctors in many other health facilities in the country? It tells you the volume of healthcare professionals that are leaving. That is pretty scary, right? But that also presents an opportunity for investors and business people. And those are the people I love. I love investors. I love business, particularly those who are looking on the continent of Africa, right? So this business idea is very simple. It could be applied to medical schools, but I'm just going to stay on the nursing side of things, right? So the concept is very simple. So think about it this way: a public-private partnership between the government and investors, or the private sector or private investors. Now, most governments cannot or do not have the bandwidth to spend money to build new nursing training institutions. They don't have it. Most African governments are heavily indebted. Most African governments are going through a lot of structural reforms or financial reforms. When they collect the taxes and collect the money, a large chunk of it goes to repay loans and interest owed to all these international financial institutions. So very little margin is left for them to put back into the country to develop their own health institutions and infrastructure and many other things. So that is where the private investor comes in. So we know that there's a gap of 6 million nurses shortage waiting to happen in the next 5 years. We know government is only able to fill 35% of the training responsibility. The 65% is a massive gap. So this is what this whole concept is. A private investor builds, runs, or executes on this concept where you build the training facility. So think of it as a nursing training school, right? A modular nursing training school. So all the classroom, the labs, the simulation labs, the hostel for both students and lecturers, and all that kind of thing. All the equipment that we need, everything is financed, constructed, or built by a private investor. Then the investor liaises with the government. The government say, hey, look, we need to fill this 6 million gap, but we can't build it. So this is what we're going to do. The government guarantees that when you build the nursing school, if your nursing school is going to take, say, 500 seats, or you're going to build a 500-seat nursing school, the government commits, bring in 500, or let's say 400 students every year, right? Every year for, let's say, the next 10, 15, maybe 20 years. So the government commits that every year, if you build that school, we're going to bring in, or we are going to commit that we will fund 400 seats out of the 500 seats that you have built. That is massive. The private sector or the investor, the investor, you can run this for 15, 20 years. Get into an agreement with the government, 15, 20 years, right? As you can see, 15 or 20 years, right? And after that, maybe depending on how it is structured, there are two ways. The investor can run it for 15, 20 years and give it to the government, right? Or the investor can still do a kind of a joint venture deal with the government. Either way, the investor wins. The government also wins. So let's look at the revenue model, revenue stream here. So, and it's not just government that can guarantee seats or can buy seats or lease seats. CSR institutions can do that. Donor agencies can also chime in that, okay, the government is committed to do, let's say, 250 every year. Donor agency can also chime in and say, we're doing 50 or 100 every year, so that the nursing gap is reduced. So let's look at the numbers. These are hypothetical numbers anyway, but they were discussed extensively at that event. Let's say the government funds and pays, the funding means that they pay a fixed amount per student per year, say anywhere between $1,800 to $2,200. Even if it's $1,500, I think it's still a good model, right? As you would see. So the government negotiates a fixed price for each student that they will bring per year. Okay. Then the student that is coming in, they also have to have a skin in the game so that they will be serious. So basically, it's some kind of a co-pay. So government is paying a large chunk, maybe 80% of the tuition for the student, but the student pays 20, or the student's parents or guardian pays 20%. There could even be a specialized scholarship scheme as well for needy students that society can also chime in to pay that copay, anywhere between $300 to $500. It's reasonable for a whole year, right? Then, so these are revenue. So you get money from the government, you get money from the copay. Then the third one is placement fees. So think about it. Most nurses are being siphoned, actually sectioned out of the continent. Where are they going? They're going to foreign countries, foreign countries, right? So these nursing training schools can liaise with international recruiters that recruits nurses to say that, hey, look, we have nurses that we are training to international standards. And the reason why this project or this business is going to be great is that this is not going to be a traditional kind of typical African nursing school. It's going to be world class, possibly with ISO certifications and everything, quality metrics, so that they need international training standards. Not that local training is not good. If local training was bad, they wouldn't be siphoning nurses out. But we're talking of upping up the ante, right? Making it going 10x in terms of quality. So we liaise with these organizations like hospitals, whether local hospitals or international hospitals or international recruiters, saying, look, anytime we send you one of our qualified nurses, you pay us a fee, like a recruitment agency does. Pay, say, $1,500 to $3,000, right? As a placement fee. That becomes also an extra ledger in terms of revenue stream. And the icing on the cake, as you put together a nursing training school, all existing nurses that are available in the country, you can run CPD programs for them, continuous professional development programs for them at that same campus, maybe even online, and then you charge somewhere between $50 to $100 a piece. That is a typical outlook of this kind of opportunity. So let's look at the economics of it. So let's say the capex just means capital expenditure or the initial capital outlay to build such a structure. It's estimated that to build a 500-seat college with dorm rooms, etc., labs, and modern equipment, ultra-modern everything, simulation labs and everything, a modular structure like that will cost anywhere between 8 to 10 million US dollars, right? So in terms of capital expenditure, that's what we're looking at. Then in terms of cash flow, as the government becomes the off-taker in terms of their lease, their guaranteed lease, you could see yields, or let's use normal everyday English for so profits of between, or returns, or let's put returns better, return of between 10 to 12% in US dollars every year, which is not bad at all. And when you add the placement income on top of it, so you add the placing, nurses in America and Europe or anywhere else, it adds an extra layer to it that increases the return, the annual profits from 10 to 12% to between 14 to 16%. That becomes a very respectable return on investment. And the cool thing is that at that rate, you'll be able to pay back on the investment within 7 years. That is, if government decides to take only 80% of the capacity, 80% of the 500 seats, that is the government commits to get 400 seats every year. At that rate, within 7 years, you recoup back your entire money. And this is why I love this. I love this too much. I love this because students get a place to study and also get better jobs. It's so important. Hospitals also get their trained nurses that they really need. I can tell you, the scare in the faces of some doctors that I see in Africa is like, our best nurses are leaving. For me, with this opportunity, yes, you can't stop the flow of nurses. I don't think anybody can, because everybody in their own individual circumstances, right? Some want to travel outside to further their studies or to work to get more money. Nobody, you can't blame them, and government cannot stop them. But what this strategy does is that it floods the zone. You have a commodity, the world loves it. Produce more of it. As you produce more of it, some are going to stay, some are going to go. Eventually, there's going to be a net increase in nurses in Africa, period. The reason is some nurses would never want to leave. Maybe they are married to somebody that their work doesn't allow them to go anywhere, maybe a wealthy person or whatever it is that they have better options. They are not going to go, right? But others would go. So in the end, there's going to be a net positive of nurse count in Africa. But if things like this are not done, there's going to be a net negative. You train nurses in the normal system, 35% capacity, and 10% of them leave. So you actually are dealing with 25% nurses within our hospitals. Kills people, right? That huge patient to nurse ratio kills people. You don't want a scenario where one nurse takes care of 3,000 patients. That nurse will be exhausted and they will start making mistakes. That is normal. That is human. To reverse that, this is why we need investors to be able to jump upon this opportunity. And the next one is that for the government, it's a win-win because this helps government fix healthcare shortages without paying the full build cost upfront because they don't have the money typically to do that. They don't have the massive capex outlay, but they can be able to collect taxes and be able to pay 400-500 students every year. Gradual, basically, it's like a mortgage, right? And then at the end of 20 years, that property or that facility could end up rolling back into the arms of government anyway. So it's a win-win for government. And then also for investors, I even love it. It's beautiful. Investors earn a steady return, right? And at the same time, they are doing good for society. Which way would you have it? You get making your money back, you have that feel-good effect that your money has really touched lives and has done good to society. Nothing beats that, right? Nothing beats that. So let's look at some examples, some kind of prototyping, or I would say beta test or beta study that is going on right now on the continent. These were three that were highlighted at that event. It's Kenya is doing something, Ghana is doing something, Senegal is doing something. We want many more countries to do something, else their healthcare systems are going to crumble. Right. So let's look at them. So the first one is Kenya. Kenya is actually actively, and I hear it's in Q3 of 2025, they are actively preparing a bid, right, for investors to come and bid to build a 750-seat national nursing college. This is hot right now in Kenya, right, because they've caught wind of this and they want to run with it, right? So if you're an investor, you can connect with the Kenyan Ministry of Health to get more information if you want to be a part of it. Number two, Ghana. I think they are working together with the German Development Agency, GIZ. They are working together to upgrade 3 regional nursing schools with private partners. Exactly the same thing, because government doesn't have that money nor the bandwidth to be able to go and be building new ultra-modern nursing institutions. Then the next one is Senegal. Senegal has set aside 40 million euros for new health skills campuses that private firms will run for 20 years. I think they are getting the financing from African Development Bank, borrowing money to do that. But I will take it a step further though. For me, in terms of investment, this is what could also be done. This is my take. In terms of investment, I believe nations can put together funds, not personally did this, but they could put together something like a venture capital fund or bond. Although bond can do this, but I really, from a private sector perspective, the concept of having something like a venture capital fund excites me because bond is, I lend my money to the government pays my money back with interest. Venture capital fund is not like that. It's a little bit riskier, but this is how it works. Your money or my money goes to invest into many different government, many different small startup projects or small investment projects, many of them, let's say 20, with a hope that a couple of them will become breakout investments. They become huge. Others will fail, others will just do normal. So if a similar system was crafted here by African governments, right? Although I'm using the term venture capital, but I'm not talking about startup here because this thing is a big thing. But this is what's going to happen. Some doctors, nurses, everyday workers can take part of their salary, invest in a fund. And that fund, let's say we want to raise $10 million to do a project like this in, say, Nigeria or Senegal. The workers are encouraged to put their money into that fund. Everybody contributes, and then that $10 million is raised. What's going to happen is that after that, when the facility becomes operational, every year they start getting their 10% return because they are shareholders. They are not just lending money to receive interest. You become a shareholder of that nursing training college. Doctors will be incentivized, teachers will be incentivized, police people will be incentivized, traditional investors, pension fund will want to put in their money. And I think, to me, that is the essence. Then we basically means we are raising money internally. Africans are raising money internally to be able to meet African challenges and African problems. That is my small twist on it. So with that said, let's jump into the action plan. Basically, if you want to do something like this, you get a commitment from the country that you want to enter, their Ministry of Health. Get a commitment from them. Go and sit down with them to get a commitment to, so that they can commit to a certain quantum of student seats, right? Then with that commitment, you can go out and raise money with investors, whether it's international investors or local investors or banks or whatever it is that you can raise money. Then you hire a builder that specializes in fast prefab school buildings, or that specializes in nursing college buildings, right? And probably may take like 14, 15 months to build, or even 18 months to build. Then you partner with local and international hospitals or recruiters so that students could have places once their training is completed. And I also know that when you do this, there are funds available, right? There are funds available. I know there's a European fund, I can't remember the name, that is available that will pay off between 5 to 15% of your capital expenditure. And so basically, you are having a blended finance. So you bring your own money, then you can get grants. That's between 5 to 15%. And you blend all that together, and then it reduces your cost of your capex cost or capital expenditure costs. Then you build a win-win solution for Africa, Mother Africa. Awesome. So if you like such content like this, and Africa excites you as an investment destination, as I said, I want you to download that African Market Entry Checklist report or checklist. It's a 14-page, fully detailed report that tells you all the things you need to do to have a seamless market entry. Also, if you want to identify hot opportunities like this on the continent of Africa, it's available to you. We're making it free for a limited time. We'll give you access to our investment opportunities finder within this tool set of AfricaInsights.ai. So all you do is use the link in the download to get access to these two things, or you can scan the QR code and get access to it. Thank you. See you.